Okay. Okay, so I believe we have everyone online. Yeah, it's the whole crowd. So I'm going to start facilitating this meeting. This is your inaugural Bristol Development Review Board meeting, 7:03. I'll take minutes this evening to keep track of things and post those later. I think the first piece really is probably could start with some introductions. I will, since it's not in order, in the same order on everyone's screen, I'll just call out your name. If you just give me literally a 30-second blurb about yourself, that would be great. Let's start with my upper left, Kevin Brown.
Hi, I'm Kevin. I've been on I was on the ZBA since about, I think,
Kevin, you might have shorted out.
together, and Ted and Paul Jackman. So, and I've been chair since, I don't know, 2008, maybe, something like that. Ever since Steve Heffernan was sent to Afghanistan the first time. So right around the Lathrop gravel pit days. So I live in Bristol up in Hardscrabble, and I practice law. I'm an attorney with Langrock, Sperry and Wool. I do a lot of municipal law and land use law, among other things. So I've got some background in this area as well.
Awesome. Next up's Carol.
Carol Klaus. I'm a retired librarian, and I've been on the board a year or two less than Kevin. So what did you figure, Kevin, 2008?
Yeah, that's about right, I guess. Yep.
Yeah.
And,
So,
and I think Paul predates us all.
yep, he does. And yeah, I was there for the gravel pit. So whatever years that was.
And years is the appropriate noun, plural.
Yeah. And I live on the north end of town on Meehan Road.
Perfect.
Next.
Next up's Tom Wells.
Hi, I live downtown, right in the Dunshee block. Carol and I are residents of Bristol for about 25 years. I served on the planning board for 8 years, I think the last 3.5 as chair, and have a big interest in the downtown.
Perfect. Next up, I've got Ted.
So I live on Church Street. I've been in the same house for since 1979. And I am retired. I've been retired from the Agency of Children and Families for 12 years. And I still work part-time for the agency, and I do the reviews for the Burlington office for kids that are in custody. They have to be formally reviewed every 6 months, and that's my about 4 days a week job, 4 days a month job rather, and I've been on the board of adjustment, the zoning board of adjustment for I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 years. I lose track of time. Is that about right, Carol?
He was on for the second go round of the pit. I remember that.
Yeah, I think that's about right.
Perfect. Next up, I've got John Moyers.
Hi, John Moyers. I live downtown too, in the old Kilburn grist mill, and I'm a landlord. I got 6 buildings downtown or adjacent to downtown that I've renovated since 2000. Over 20 years, and yeah, happy to serve.
Awesome. And Paul.
Good evening. I've been on the zoning board since 1999 and retired fuel dealer working part-time, lifelong resident of Bristol.
Perfect. Hey, Josh, you're up next.
I found the unmute button.
Nice.
So Bristol resident, Josh. I used to be Moncton until I left for college. Came back about 3 years ago. I've been living here and up on Meehan Road. I'm an architect by trade over at Freeman French Freeman in Burlington, and looking forward to being involved.
Awesome. And last but not least, Rob.
So I am an engineering technician by trade with an engineering firm in Middlebury, and been on the planning commission for the last 3 years, and wanted to explore the other side of things as well. So
Nice. And the other person we have on board is Jim. Hi, Jim. Thanks for joining us, and we'll get to visitor business in just a minute, okay? Pull up. I apologize. And actually, this is, if you want, Jim, if you want to offer any input, or are you just here to observe and see how we operate?
Just here to observe, that's it.
Sounds great. Thanks for taking time out.
Okay, do a good job.
So on to the next line of business. It would be the organizational. So the next line will be the organizational meeting. We lost somebody. Did I?
Back.
Oh, okay.
I lost you momentarily. Everybody was frozen.
Okay.
Now we're
So
losing Ted. Ted's going to the icebox.
No, don't blame him sometimes.
No, Ted's taking a quiche out of the oven.
So the organizational portion of this is, as I sent out an email a little bit earlier today, the document I sent out yesterday was more of a talking discussion document to get things rolling. Not really sure how in depth this board really needs to have that type of document. That was where I generated that from was I took the planning commission's sort of planning document or policy document, bastardized it down to something that said development review board. It took out things I knew that had absolutely nothing to do with your board. The hopes are that this evening, the biggest thing you really need to do is you need to appoint a chair or elect a chair, however you want to go about doing that. And from that point, have a discussion on some of the points of the processes that will be used. A lot of the document I sent out, again, the planning commission is more of is just that. They're a planning board. They weren't hearing a lot of hearings. They had some, but the primary goal, their primary charge is updating the town plan and the zoning bylaws and the now subdivision regulations. So that document was really geared more towards that type of a meeting. Your charge, for the most part, is going to be hearings on subdivisions, plan unit developments, conditional uses. Those are the three biggies that come before you, but there's also boundary line adjustments. You also are the ones that would be if somebody disputed my decision. Oh, by the way, I'm Chris. Anyone who doesn't know me, I'm the zoning administrator in Bristol. I forgot about my intro. But if there's a dispute with any of my rulings or decisions, the appeals process is to you folks first. So you have a lot of depth and breadth of what you'll be doing. But like I said, the very first thing I believe you need to do is really assign a chair, decide on who's going to chair this ship.
Can we do that last?
What's that?
I said, maybe we ought to, I'm thinking maybe we ought to do that last, we can talk through some of this stuff, and as long as we come out of it,
Yeah,
and maybe a vice chair is not a bad idea as well.
I was going to recommend that the clerk / scribe role, it's still up in the air. The town is currently discussing possibly hiring a scribe to handle all their meetings. So
Oh,
that
really? Wow.
it's up in the air at the moment, but that would be great for everybody, because then those that are in the meetings, the board members can actually focus on the meeting and not worrying about taking minutes.
Yeah, no, it's really hard. We actually had that once upon a time, but it was Jen Stetson did it early on, before she was assistant treasurer or clerk, and it didn't last long. The select board found other uses for the money, and that disappeared, and it got stuck back onto the zoning administrator.
Yeah, one of the discussions was it's awful expensive for me to take minutes, but we'll leave that at that. We're having that discussion. We're trying to figure that out. In the short term, I'll handle it for you folks. If that's, especially this evening and going forward at the end of your meeting, if you want to go a different route, I'm all in. I will not break my heart if I never have to take minutes again, but I'm more than willing to do that for the board. So
yeah, it's really, I have found it really imperative to have somebody taking the minutes, because you can't think about that when in this discussions are kind of freewheeling. Stuff's coming up. You really need the minute taker to get the facts down.
Kevin, let me
Sure.
ask a question. Tom Wells, in the past, when you're serving in the quasi judicial function, actually determining an application or a variance or something, somebody has to prepare a resolution. So has that been prepared by a clerical person as well?
Me.
You've done it. Okay. If you're willing to do it, that's great. But that's
Well, that's the
another thing that would be very handy to be assisted
yeah.
on.
Well, that's, when Paul, I guess, has the longest history, it sometimes decisions in the past weren't prepared at all, and then because I remember a debate in one of my first meetings between Ted Lillis and somebody else about what somebody said at the meeting they were going to do with respect to the second story, and I said, well, isn't there anything wrong? No, we just all talked about it.
Yeah, that's not, as you know, that's not a good best practice.
No, it was not. So
You
at
clearly
least
have to have resolutions.
yeah, I don't know how the PC worked, but with the ZBA, I wrote all the decisions.
Well, especially since under the DRB process, there'll probably be more decisions to make.
Well, there will.
Either if you're willing to do it, that's fine. But if not, then
Well,
I would say
it's
the select board really has to help out.
it's who's ever lucky enough.
Doing that.
I think it's who's ever lucky enough to be chair.
Then I think you've cornered the job.
No, well, no, yeah, I actually do want to make clear that just the fact that I've been doing it for a long time for the ZBA, if somebody else wants to be chair, fine. I'm happy to have someone else do it. I'm happy to do it if folks want to do it, but it's not my birthright. It's not my legacy. It's just that I've been doing it for 13 years. It's kind of like I told Chris, it's like the Roach Motel. I got in and I couldn't leave. So if somebody else feels like, hey, I'd really like to do that. I've got experience, that'd be great. And I would applaud.
So as you look through the documents, so the first piece was really the assignment of tasks and roles. I agree with Kevin that I believe that a chair in a co-chair or a vice chair, they were co-chairing, but a vice chair is actually very imperative, because somebody needs to be able to step in and be predetermined if the chair is not able to make a meeting, because there's nothing worse than having to cancel or postpone a hearing because of someone foreseen. And any of you who've been too involved in hearings, you know that you go, you're all set to go, and all of a sudden it's like, we're not doing it. That's not fair to the community. So I really believe that that's absolutely imperative. But that's, again, I'm just here to help guide you folks. But that's something. And again, the scribe aspect or clerk, it's described in there. I don't believe at this point you need to really call that out, but that's, again, I think.
Go ahead.
I really think that the key is the two chair positions need to be defined.
I agree. You know, I looked at the statute, and there are lots of statutes that apply, and the statute that governs the planning commission actually says thou shalt appoint a chair and a vice chair. The statute that applies to development review boards just says we're supposed to elect officers.
Yeah.
I don't know what the hell that means, you know, but I think chair and vice chair makes a heck of a lot of sense. And I don't think we need anything more than that, but unless other people.
I agree very much with that. I have a question. Chris, in your position as zoning administrator, which is new to me, at least at work, will you be attending all the meetings with the board?
Initially, yes. It really, in different communities I do this with, some I attend all of them, and others as requested by the chair. The main reason why I usually go to hearings is I'm usually the front line between the applicant while they're trying to put together a subdivision. I've worked with them. Now, if there's questions on the zoning regs themselves, I can offer my expertise or understanding of why I directed the applicant in the direction I did. So
In the cases that we'll have that are an appeal of a decision that Chris has made, he has to be there, and he presents his decision. Basically, he's almost like the prosecutor. But Chris and I were talking earlier today. I think there's only been 2 or 3 of those in my time on the board, and so it's actually pretty darn rare.
I would just, from my own experience, I would say that obviously when there's an appeal of a decision of the zoning administrator, you have to be present. But I think it's helpful if the select board sees fit to make it part of your job to come to the meetings. I mean, that's my observation.
You know, historically, it's been essential because, you know, we're a small town, and we've kept it relatively informal, and we've not wanted people to have to hire professionals, hire lawyers, and so many times the applicant is really, it's deer in the headlights, you know, and they're presenting the application, but they're really relying on the zoning administrator to help fill in the blanks for them. They just don't know what to say. They don't know, they just don't have command of the bylaws. And so it's been absolutely essential. And I don't know, Carol, you probably remember, Paul, some of those applications we got that were like on a napkin, which is not good. but you know, the zoning administrator has worked a lot before the hearing to get the application ready for the board. And it's really important to have the ZA there to help explain.
Well, I'm glad to hear if Chris is going to be attending. I think that's the right decision. And honestly, subdivision applications, which are a new thing for the board, they should at least be a little more sophisticated and the product of, you know, engineering as opposed to just on a napkin. but for sure.
The challenge, or the most important thing, is to make sure that the application is complete enough before it comes to us. We had sometimes before Chris where it came in and it just really wasn't ready. The person didn't know the most basic information, and that's bad because we have to adjourn to another time. But Chris is kind of like the gatekeeper. It doesn't get to us until it's in shape enough, and we the ZAs have always been pretty flexible on that. We haven't required engineered plans. We've been softer than the bylaws require, which I think is appropriate.
Yeah, the new subdivision regs and PUDs do require some
Those
engineering.
need flats. You can't, no sketches on a napkin for subdivisions.
No, but for things like conditional uses, it really depends on the complexity, and that falls back if the hand-drawn map or somebody took an overlay map and penciled in what they want to do. If that's adequate and it feels like you have the enough working knowledge, you have the latitude for that. As long as it's not. Right. So it's worked out well in the past.
Do we still have, I haven't thoroughly gone through all the bylaws yet. Do we still have the safety valve waiver provision for setbacks in the former village district?
I don't, what do you mean by that, Kevin?
Well, in the previous iterations of the bylaws, there was a provision if for properties in the village, what used to be the village, because they're almost all non-conforming because they're too small, where you could put accessory buildings and such, you could not be freed from the setback requirements if there were other similar encroachments into the setback in the area. And that came up a lot. And a lot of times I can specifically remember people not being understanding ahead of time. They have to give us evidence about, whose garage near them is right next to the property line. And, so we weren't making it up at the hearing. I don't know if that's still in there. I imagine it probably is.
Well, yeah, they actually formalized it. It's anywheres in the town. We formalized a waiver process. So an applicant can actually ask for a waiver against dimensional standards only, which would be setbacks, height, lot coverage, anything in the dimensional standards. But you couldn't ask for a waiver for use.
So Chris, waivers for dimensional things and variances for use in more serious matters.
Right, and variances are tough because
Impossible.
Yeah, at one of the ZA planning forums I went to, one gentleman summed up variances the best. They're like unicorns. Everyone's talked about them, but no one's ever seen one.
Yeah, there's not a single Vermont Supreme Court case that affirms a grant of a variance. They're all reversals because the standard comes from state statute. Our bylaws follow the state statute. And one of the elements, and you have to hit all the elements, is that there's no other reasonable use of the property without it. And the owner didn't create the problem themselves by what they wanted to do. So it's virtually impossible. And so you really need a waiver provision. So I'm glad we got that. Chris, can you make administrative waivers on certain things if you don't have that power in the bylaws? Okay.
Nope, nor do I want it.
Yeah, it's authorized by statute if it's put in the bylaws, but.
Yeah, no, and we talked about that, and the first time we talked about it, Eric Foreman was the ZA, and he felt the same way I do, that anytime there's going to be a deviation from the bylaws, it really should come to a board for their approval. It can get dicey quick, and puts myself in the closest that I have that I can do is if there's a minor adjustment to a site plan, I can approve that. Or if there's a boundary line adjustment that's not going to create a new lot, I can approve those if I'm comfortable.
An adjustment, yeah.
If I'm comfortable, if I feel the boundary line adjustment, it's not going to create a new lot, but I'm not comfortable making that decision, I have the authority to punt it to you folks.
Punt it, yep, okay.
So,
yeah. I appreciate what Chris was attempting to do by getting this document out. I will offer, I think, one overview for folks, and I'm not being critical of Chris. Most of what's in here is actually already required by statute. and the statutes are or the bylaws. So I think it's not necessary, in fact, can be a mistake to pretend you're adopting something which you have no authority over already. And if there's any difference between what procedure you adopt and what the bylaws say or what the rules say, it just creates problems down the road. I appreciate its function is to help educate. And as we go through this, I can actually tell you, or I'll provide a summary if people want, of what the statutes say about each one of these things. The statute tells us how to handle hearings, tells us how to what our functions are, what notices are. So we can provide an information source for the board, so we're all working off the same page. I think that works. But to create a procedural rule that actually attempts to mimic in some way, which is something that's already mandated, can only lead to trouble. It's creating a fiction in a way.
Yeah, and again, I take no offense at that, Kevin. When I generated that document,
Yep.
My sole intent was to have this discussion and find out how in depth do you really. I mean, this board is bound by a lot of the DRB between the bylaws and state statute. What you can and can't do is pretty well hemmed in. The Planning Commission, on the other hand, as Tom and Rob can contest, it's a lot more philosophical what the Planning Commissions did.
You're making policy.
Yeah, you're not making rulings.
You're right. You're deciding on policy and how to implement it, and that's inherently political. And
there is maybe a way to accomplish what you've set out to do, Chris, and that is, as Kevin correctly says, this is really all in the state statute or the new unified regulations that Bristol has. So, for example, powers and duties, you refer to 4460, which is the state law, but it's even a little bit more specific. I think it's in section 332 of our own unified regulations. Maybe just the titles and then cites to the appropriate places might be helpful to board members or other people.
I'm happy to work with Chris to prepare
you often do that, Kevin. I'm familiar with this and do this kind of thing. So I took a look at those things, but it's very helpful to know, to have somebody point you where those things are dealt with, either in our local unified regs, which largely reflect the statute or the statute. But I see your point. If you summarize it a little different than it actually is, this really doesn't have the force of any law or anything. It's just
right. But if you adopt it as a procedure, it masquerades as a law. But it's not.
Yeah. So what I really like, Tom, your idea with that is that it's more of a reference document that would
and a very
keep
helpful one. I think your instinct is dead on. It's helpful to people, not just to board members, but to people who want to be in front of the board. If you want them to be more informed and do a good job, then they understand.
Perfect.
The other thing besides writing a decision that the chair does is actually run the meeting. And that can be a challenge sometimes, but it's important to have whoever wants to do it be comfortable with asserting control and direction, because sometimes you actually have to keep it from becoming a free-for-all. Doesn't happen very often, but that's an important piece. And the statutes don't provide a lot of detail about how this board will run hearings, because they're quasi-judicial. It says what the rules of evidence are, and they're the rules of evidence that you use in court, except they're relaxed for where reasonable people in the performance of their duties would rely on such things. So it's the rules of evidence with a big safety valve, and you can exclude irrelevant and immaterial evidence. And the chair pretty much does that. So, and we've been pretty soft on rules of evidence because people are, it's not, we don't want it to be, it hasn't been a mini court and we don't want it to be a mini court. Or at least I don't. I shouldn't speak for we. This board is structured as the appeals from this board are to the environmental court, what's called de novo, which means anew. And it doesn't have to be that way. Most towns are that way. And the most important thing to me was that we kept that. So what it means is if there's an appeal of our decision, the environmental court just sits as if it's us and makes the decision anew without deference or regard to what happened below. The applicant or the appellants put on their case, put on their evidence, and at that point it's a courtroom with rules of evidence and all of that. But you know what? That almost never happens. It's pretty rare, and so with that being the sort of procedural rule of law check on the process, we don't need to worry as much about being dotting I's and crossing T's. We can get the information out from the applicants and let the opponents have their say, keep it civil and write up a decision that people can understand. And if people don't like it, then they can turn it into a court proceeding. Towns that are on the record, which is the other choice by statute, have to create a record at the zoning board. That's like a court. You have to have a transcript. You have to have rulings of evidence. And it's the only time that people can put in evidence. So that means the environmental court judge, if there's an appeal, just looks to see if there's sufficient evidence and whether the conclusions follow from the findings or reviews any rulings of law that might have been made. So it's a very deferential standard, and it's the only place to develop facts. Thank God we don't have that. Middlebury does, and Virgins does, and I've been involved with both those towns in various proceedings, and it puts such a burden at the board level, and we don't have it, which is great, and so which we can sort of collaboratively get things done, and it usually works out fine.
So what I was trying to locate, and I can't put my hands on it, when I was in Starksville the other day, Starksville has a document that goes through the steps of a hearing. And I think whoever the chair is, I'll pull that together with them, send it out for their review, and then we'll push it out to the rest of the board. And then you all can discuss if you need to more. But I think that that's very imperative so that your hearings are consistent, so that every applicant goes through the same process. There's steps in it maybe that are a 5-second discussion, and there's sometimes that same step for another applicant, maybe a 5-hour discussion. God, I hope not, but there is the chance it could be 5 hours. So I will pull that together. I was trying to locate it here as we were chatting, and I can't put my hands on it, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's something we could certainly talk about. And
in my past experience, if the application materials themselves are pretty organized in terms of making them present what it is they want to do and why they want to do it, that goes a long way towards helping the applicant know what they need to present to the board. As obviously with your assistance, Chris, when somebody comes in and doesn't know how to fill it out.
And that's one of the things I've been working on from the front end of before the hearings, is just that coming up with a workflow or a flow chart, and then a checklist for the applicant so that they know they have to have, if it's a subdivision, they have to have a plat, they have to have a summary, they have to, whatever the requirements are for the process they want to go through, so that they aren't going in totally blind, wasting their time and yours, because as Kevin said earlier, if the application isn't complete, you're gonna have to postpone the hearing or whatever until
Adjourn it to a date certain.
yeah, and that's a waste of everyone's time. I would rather see a candidate come in or an applicant come in, even if the application's only 95% done and you all can condition the last couple things. That's a beautiful day. But if it's glaringly bad, you all can, as you know, you can't do it. My goal is to have it on the front end, so when applicants arrive in front of you, if they're willing to do the work, we'll be well prepared.
Yep. It's real. That's the way to go. You're the check on the system for.
So the other notes I have here, I got way too many things. I got to move this laptop. So I got too many things going on, too small of a desk and too much stuff. So we got the so the other piece that I want to discuss is your meeting schedule. Currently, the DRB is slated to meet that's right, second and fourth Tuesday. Because the planning is first and third. I just have to get my, the hard part for me is I quite often get the initial scheduling done as well because I have to figure out posting notices and all that on the front end. If we could have a set preferred night, is it the first, or is it the second or the fourth of every month? And then if you have excess, you have your overflow meetings for the second hearing.
You mean a calendar date like the first of the month, or are you talking about the first Tuesday like town meeting?
Now, so that every month we know that the second Tuesday is almost guaranteed there's hearings. That's when we're going to try to schedule all the hearings. Now, if it's August and we're just swamped, you're going to have to meet the fourth as well. Does that make sense? Or do you, because that way I can give people a time frame of when they can fit in.
No, that's helpful for me to try and plan. I'm not retired and I have other night work sometimes. So that's helpful for me to have a day that I know if we have a hearing, it's going to be then. We might not have a hearing. We haven't had many in the past few years. That's how I certainly prefer that.
Yeah, and you're gonna have a few coming right up because of course we adopted these back in November, and we've had a few people that have been patient and have waited so we could get together and get your group sort of
site plans.
I've got one site plan amendment. I've got a conditional use potential that's sitting on my desk that the applicant's still on the fence about. And there's one other, but yeah, the biggest one is the site plan amendment that you guys will have to review.
Well, I would support your suggestion. I think it's a good one in terms of a designated meeting, and the other one's the overflow.
Okay. My personal preference, just because of my timing with other boards and other, would be for the second Tuesday to be your designated hearing one, and the fourth Tuesday would be your add-on meetings as needed. The thing with that is that all these meetings have to be warned 15 days out, which means it's really 3 weeks out because they have to get in the Addison. And especially now that the Addison only publishes once a week, has really made my life hell. But so it's really 3 weeks out when an applicant walks in the door and hands it to me before we could schedule it anyways. So the odds of you having a meeting on the second Tuesday, and then all of a sudden you get a call from me on the third Tuesday that, hey, you got to meet next week, it's never going to happen. Right. You're always going to have 3-4 weeks notice on a hearing.
That works.
Correction, especially the overflows. So if everyone's okay with that concept of using the second Tuesday as your primary hearing night,
Yes.
awesome.
And you know, having the fourth Tuesday as the overflow day, that's helpful in those rare but happens sometimes cases where we have to adjourn to a date certain because somebody needs to get some approval that they didn't think to bring or has some key piece missing that nobody realized. We've already got that date.
Right. Awesome. So those are really the big pieces that I had as far as this first meeting
Chris,
from
you
my
had-
standpoint.
You had the town's conflict of interest policy in the package.
Yeah, so that is something that everyone should review and be very aware of. That's that's select board documentation, and Valerie wanted to make sure that got out to everyone.
Yeah, that's important.
Are board members asked to sign it? Because we should.
I believe so. I will confirm that with Valerie tomorrow, and if so, I will set up a method of either getting it so you guys can sign it and email it back to me, or I'll have a copy at the office. That
That's the best way to say that if anybody ever later says they weren't familiar with it, that they are because they signed it. So it's the right thing to do.
I prefer to have a signature on it that everyone says, yes, I've read it. Doesn't mean you agree with it. All it says that you read it and you understand what the rules are.
Yep.
So I will confirm that. I'll confirm that with Valerie and get back to you guys tomorrow.
Okay.
Take that back. I'm not in Bristol tomorrow. It'll be Thursday. I can get back to you all.
Sounds good.
Does anyone here have any things that they would like to discuss as far as the board, the structure, how you guys are going to proceed, what to expect? Like I said, this is the DRB is new to Bristol. It's not new to me. I've been zoning administrator in a bunch of towns for the last few years. So if you have questions on like how things are going to work. I do have one question that we should address too, because I just saw Josh and Rob sitting here. How would, in the past, have you utilized alternates, Kevin? Because you guys had alternates on the ZBA, right?
Yeah, and we, for a lot of years, Chris Lathrop was one, and he sat in every meeting for about 2 years, you know, and I think only once or twice did we have a full board plus some alternates show up. And in that situation, the alternate wouldn't vote, but our alternates, right, Carol, they were in there a lot.
Yeah, and when I stepped down and Chris stepped on, then he quit. So I don't know.
Yeah. So I think what Eric did, Chris, was if we were going to be short of a full board, he would reach out to the alternates, but he would, if and maybe not always, if he was sure we were going to have 6 or something like that, maybe as a courtesy he did. But if he knew we had a full board coming, he didn't bother the alternates. They're always welcome, but he wouldn't. I don't think he reached out for them to say, "Hey, please show up just in case."
So the bigger question too, that is, so Rob and Josh show up to the meetings, to the hearing. Are they participating as board members at that point, but just can't vote, or are they participating as guests?
I think it should be. I think best practice is for them to come to all meetings if they're willing, and to participate in everything but the vote.
That's my gut feeling as well. It keeps them, anyone who's sitting in an alternate position, keeps them abreast of what's going on, keeps them familiar with the regulations that you follow and the proceedings. I sort of think it would be if I was an alternate, I'd hate to be sort of like that, the guy they pull in off the bench with 30 seconds left and they expect you to hit a 3 cold. It's just not a great environment to put somebody in. So if Rob and Josh,
it becomes a waste. It becomes a waste of time for those who are just expected to attend these meetings and, oh, we're not expecting anything from you. So
Yeah.
Also, in the rare instance, and Kevin knows better whether this happens, and he said it's very rare, but if somebody goes to a multiple night hearing, then you've got a situation where if someone was present the first night but's not there the second night, that the alternate's absolutely ready to vote right then. So
That's
I just think it's really
that's a good
difficult
point,
to
Tom. I
because
hadn't
it's
thought of
willing
that.
to
That's
come and I think they should be allowed to fully participate, just not vote if they're not needed to vote.
yeah. That's certainly how we handled it on those rare instances when we had a full board. Not that there are other ways to do it, but what I think, Carol, what we did is if the alternate was there, we had a full board, they wanted to ask questions or whatever, they asked questions and they participated fully until it was time for the vote.
That's what I recall.
Yeah, it didn't happen a lot. Most of the time, the alternate, when they were there, they were actually voting
Yeah.
because there was an opening.
Yeah, because I personally, I'm excited to have alternates. As Kevin can attest to, in any of the previous ZBA members, I've been scurrying around before meetings, making those last minute phone calls, trying to make sure somebody's going to show up.
Right.
It makes your board look amateur, and it doesn't bode well in the public opinion if the board
Right,
can't get. So
and-
having if you two are willing to attend as many meetings as you can, I personally find that would be very helpful. But this is your board. I'm just your guiding.
The other thing that's helpful to having the alternates there is that you stay away from the situation where we've got a quorum is 4 and we've got 4 people at the meeting, which means to render a decision, we have to be unanimous.
Yeah. And that happened just the last meeting.
I know, and it's
Yeah.
I don't like that situation at all because it puts a lot of burden on someone who thinks, oh geez, if I don't vote, I may not really like this. And now I've got pressure to go forward, otherwise nothing happens. Whereas if you have enough people, then people who have a concern can vote no without feeling like they're throwing a monkey wrench in.
Good point.
No room for error if you have the quorum number. No room for dissension.
But I think that's a good procedure, and thanks for bringing it up, Chris. That's really helpful.
Perfect. I'll just reach out. John, you haven't had any input yet. Do you have anything that you want to throw out there?
Sorry, unmuted. No, I've been listening and learning. My questions are getting answered before I get a chance to ask them, so that's
Awesome.
good. No, I feel very good about this, and so I'm just excuse me. I'm just noticing that. So these policies and procedures will have to be adopted, right? Because and that's done by us.
Yes.
And we're sort of filling in some blanks here.
Well,
I think the conclusion that we reached earlier, John, was that maybe we wouldn't adopt them, and that maybe, I think Kevin indicated a willingness to do it. Others can certainly assist, rather than have something like this that doesn't have the force of law, that what we could do would be to give under these headings, give the specific sites to either the local unified regulations or the state law, which really does apply.
that's right.
You create a kind of a table of contents or an index, but you wouldn't necessarily try to summarize it. Which is what's been done now.
Yeah,
Can we acknowledge it as a guide?
Whoop, hold on, John.
That seems wise to me.
Okay.
With the links or the references in this document, so people can go read the statutes themselves if they wish.
and it's handy. It's like having a pamphlet almost. It's a cheat sheet for in the hearings where you're not flipping through the bylaws, which is a much bigger document. It was always a big document, not as big as other towns, but it's hard to be flipping through looking for something. So it's nice to have a sort of a cheat sheet that zeroes in on what our duties are with respect to hearings.
And Josh, did you have some input?
No, I was just going to say, and I think it was repeated by someone else, that we're basically acknowledging it as a guide. this group is acknowledging as a guide to standard
Yeah,
statute.
Right, in those places where it's talking about statutes, there are things in here that I personally don't want to acknowledge as a guide at all. Like Robert's Rules has no place in my view, in our proceedings. We're a quasi judicial hearing. I don't know Robert's Rules, and I don't know anybody who actually does. A lot of people think they do, and it turns hearings into parliamentary debates, and so it may be appropriate to handle some planning commission meetings or something like that, because maybe you needed some rules. But I feel strongly that we don't need anything like that, nor is it actually seems to conflict with what the rules for hearings are.
It's actually absolutely correct.
Yeah, I won't lie. I was just putting stuff out there.
I know. No, I know. Josh was saying, well, as a guide, let's look at it as a guide. I'm saying there are things in there I don't even want in a guideline. I would be opposed to having it as guidelines, because I think I've been in these meetings sometimes where people get into this arcane debate about Robert's Rules, and I come away convinced that nobody really understands them, and I acknowledge that I don't, and nor do I want to learn them. My God, I can't imagine trying to apply them.
I've spent hours reading them it can be very painful.
Yeah, it's sort of a solution in search of a problem, in my view.
So are people good with other people's opinions on having that removed from that document altogether? You guys all good there?
I have a question about the DRB may serve, the chair, whoever we select, can serve up to 3 consecutive one-year terms. Is that what we want to go with? Because it certainly isn't what we have been doing.
I actually had, that's what the Planning Commission runs on. And their theory on that was just every 3 years, a new face in front of it. They are running more on a policy creation. They've run into a problem though. At the end of 3 years, if nobody puts their hand up, as Tom can contest, if nobody else puts their hand up, who the heck's going to be chair? You really have to, a chair really has to want to do it personally. And I could see eliminating that. The only reference maybe is that a chair is decided every year. If you wanted to just have that kind of verbiage in your document, that would be just so there's some acknowledgement that it occurs annually, and that would be the extent of the chairs, the officers or whatever appointment stuff. That is okay with you folks?
Yeah, I think that makes good sense, Chris. I think it's you may rue the day that you adopted some rule in the abstract that at the outset sounded really good and easy to administer. Now it ties your hands down the road. And if we just had renewed appointments, that's fine. I'm not generally in favor of creating procedural requirements just for the sake of procedural requirements, unless they really serve a purpose.
Well, in support of your position there, Kevin, too, the other thing, to change these rules or guidelines, you need a supermajority. I mean, the way it's written right now, you need a 2/3 vote. So you're kind of locking them in too. So this is creating a problem where you don't actually have a concern yet.
Right.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, if 6 months in or 2 years down the road, it feels that this board feels that they need to create more definitive structure or guidelines or policies, that's something you could do in the future. But I'm totally good with creating a statute type and bylaw reference document that outlines your authority, power, requirements, whatever you want to call it, and that the procedural piece, you really just follow. I mean, there are some pretty basic practices as far as how to run a hearing, as far as admitting evidence and that kind of stuff.
could I suggest maybe as a, Kevin has indicated willingness to do this and you have as well, and I'm sure others would assist. Let's take a look at that. I think everybody's gonna find that they like that. That's gonna get it done. And then that eliminates the worrying about wordsmithing our way through guidelines that are not really the impact of law.
I love it.
Yeah,
So
no,
I
I'm,
would do.
I'm happy to work with Chris to to clean it up and we'll send it around again, and at our next meeting, whenever that is, we can adopt it as guidelines or whatever. We can decide on if we want on chair and vice chair tonight and sort of reconvene. Everybody gets an updated copy that will be subject to further discussion, but then whenever we meet next, we can adopt it or change it or however.
No reference to Robert's rules, but just to get us along in this, I'll make that a motion that we do that.
Well, we still do motions.
Yeah,
I'll make a motion, and then maybe we can, as a group, decide whether or not we want to do that.
Second that.
You can call the vote, Chris, if it.
Yeah, hang on. So Tom, your motion is to create,
To have you and Kevin spend some time coming up with a document that is more of a guide to the existing statute and the existing ordinance, and less independent verbiage. And then for us to review that.
perfect. And John, you seconded that, correct?
Right.
Okay. Okay, any discussion? Perfect.
I just had one
Oh.
question, and it's not maybe relevant to the vote, so I could wait, but so we can't operate till we have this adopted? Or we can operate,
Oh, yeah.
we can go forward?
You can go forward. You have statutory
good.
authority to move forward.
All right,
Sure.
good. That, to me, would seem important since you have some things pending.
So any other questions? Any other comments? If not,
That was a good question.
what's that?
I said that was a good question.
Absolutely was. All those in favor say aye, or raise your hand actually for, if you could. All those opposed?
Is Paul raising his hand?
Oh,
Paul, are you good with that?
I am good with that.
Perfect. Motion passed. Great. So I think the last bit of business you all have really is now picking your chair and vice chair, unless anyone else has other discussion that they feel that is good for the board.
I'll make the motion on that. I was delighted to hear that Kevin has a willingness to continue doing this. So I would like to nominate him as chair.
I second that.
No one should be shy. Saying, no, I'd really like to do that. Come on, Ted, I know you've been lusting for the gavel all
Kevin, I have been singing your praises for longer than you can probably imagine.
Oh, thank you, Ted.
You do a marvelous job, and
Well,
very strong supporter of you.
I'm happy to, well, maybe happy is the wrong word. I'm willing to do it and get us off the ground at some point. It's important, I think, to have others trained up and to be able to handle it as well. And particularly in writing the decisions, I try to make them clear and detailed, but not so detailed that the applicant can't figure out what the heck it is. It doesn't have to be comprehensive, but it does need to hit the main points, and most importantly, say what the conditions are and what the rules are clearly. And so a simple letter isn't enough, but it doesn't have to be a 10-pager either.
Nope. So any additional discussion on this motion for the Kevin become chair of the Development Review Board? Perfect. Hearing no other discussion, all those in favor, raise your hand.
And Paul speak.
Yeah, and Paul, are you in favor?
Yes, I am.
Where are you, Paul?
Absolutely.
Perfect. So the next thing we need is somebody to either raise their hand or be nominated for vice chair. Anyone feels that they would love to step up to that, please don't all raise your hand at once. I mean, I can
One
do
of the other long-serving members. Carol, would you be game?
I'm not interested, no.
Okay.
Don't make me do the Zoom dartboard decision for you.
Well,
I'm not interested because I feel like I have a learning curve and I think I should sit back and learn. So
Tom, could you do it for at least the first year and until some of
Yeah,
the,
I'll be happy to do it because I know you're not going to need a vice chair much. Like
You've
you,
got-
I've done
PTA
municipal
experience,
elections law
which
too,
is-
but unlike you, I'm now retired. So I don't particularly need to do this, but I'll be happy to do it as a matter of service
Yeah.
right now. But I would encourage somebody who, someone else to, run next year because I don't aspire to be chair. But
Perfect.
I'll be happy to be vice chair right now.
we'll have John trained up by then.
Okay.
Perfect. So does somebody want to make a motion on that?
I'll make a
move to
motion.
appoint Tom Wells as vice chair.
I'll second it.
Carol second. Any more discussion? Okay. All those in favor, raise your hand. Paul, you good with that?
I'm good with that.
Perfect. Motion passes. So Kevin and Tom, thank you for stepping up. I now officially have no role in this meeting. But
thank you for getting us this far.
Yeah, so do we want to, it won't take us that long, Chris, a couple of weeks to, I think 2 weeks for us to, between the two of us, our schedules to get a working draft out to folks.
Yeah.
And what's your hypothetical or targeted first meeting date?
the second Tuesday of March, you guys will be having a hearing.
Okay, so that's about a month away. So if we can,
That's the 9th.
Let me I have to just pull my calendar. I believe it is.
Yeah.
Yes, it'll be March 9th. You will have a hearing. The applicant wanted to do it sooner, but again, because of notifications, they're like, oh, can we be on in 2 weeks? I'm like, no, you can't because of,
Yeah.
we're legally bound to 15-day notifications and all that good stuff. So
so
That's not town meeting informational night, is it?
the town meeting's
No.
already come and gone by
Going to
then.
be done, yes,
Yeah,
never mind.
first Tuesday.
yeah, that's first week.
Good call though, John, because that could have been a mess. Cool. So why don't we plan on that, Kevin? Is that you and I will
Yeah,
get out?
so, between the two of us, Chris, if we can commit to, getting it out to the board, hopefully like a week before or whatever, we can deal with it at the start of the meeting. And if people could, if they had particular concerns, if you and I shot for like 2 weeks, Chris, if people had, proposals or amendments or concerns, we could work that into the draft
Absolutely.
and then be pretty much good to go with an adoption even as a guideline. I like the guideline approach because it gives us rules, but sometimes rules can get in your way in small town boards.
100% agree. On that, so just as a reminder for anyone who hasn't sat on a board, email communication. Reply all is not a preferred communication method. Once it's replied all, that is public record and I have to track it and keep that. So as we
Right.
send these out for drafts and for input, responding back to either Kevin or myself directly, or to other board members ask their opinion. One-on-one discussions are okay, but group emailing really should be limited, if not eliminated, if possible. Any discussions we have as a group, that you have as a group, should occur in a meeting format.
So Chris, we're going to, obviously, I think, I'll clarify that, so this meeting is going to be a Zoom meeting, right?
Yeah, it's going to have to be, because as of right now, the select board really is not, they're not happy with me, because I did have a handful of in-person meetings that I did. They were actually hybrid meetings.
Yeah.
And I've been told that that's not acceptable at this point in time.
So maybe we should take a few minutes right now to brainstorm about if people have had particular experiences in Zoom world that worked or would be avoided. I find them challenging, to say the least, when you have multiple people and choppy connections. And for instance, like, how are we going to handle documents, Chris? People need to get the documents. Everybody needs to be looking at the same thing. And they need to somehow be labeled with A, B, C, or stickers or something. Otherwise, you spend so much time saying, no, this one, and holding it up to the camera. It's awful.
Yeah, it's been, the other boards that I work with, it's been a challenge. One thing that can happen, not in the first meeting or two, just because of weather, but I know, like, Moncton, their DRB opted then they start holding their meetings out at their fire station, because they were able to open the overhead doors, be 10 feet apart, and it was a safe environment. And because you have less than 10 people, it meets state guidelines, but with applicants and guests. So it's sort of a creative way to do it. I don't say, I would never want to meet just on the bandstand kind of concept, because these are hearings. But I happen to have access to the fire department, so we could do something like that. Or the rescue squad is another building that is a large open building that can be easily ventilated for safety and all that. So
I wonder what, until we could do that, Chris, would it be possible for them to submit everything that they think the board is going to need? Hopefully, certainly their application and any other materials, and then have you upload those, and then you can, obviously we're all familiar with in Zoom, you can, present documents. Really, you let them still present it, but you could drive essentially.
yeah,
And pop up the documents, and then they'd be in front of everybody, which would work unless, say, something new and spontaneous came up, but that shouldn't happen too often.
no, and worst case scenarios, even if they still present old, just traditional paper, I have the ability to scan and convert to PDF. And my goal would be to do just that, Tom, is any document or map or whatever that's going to be utilized in that hearing, I need a digital copy so that we can do a screen share. So when Ted has a question on the site plan and where the culverts are, we can pull it up and everyone can be talking about the same thing. You all aren't flipping through and scurrying through your piles of papers on your desk. They should all be on the screen for you all to share.
I'm living a good chunk of my life on Zoom nowadays, and people have gotten pretty good about moving through the documents, and the person is still up in the corner and the documents in the middle, and it won't work if we ask applicants to do it, because they won't know how to do it. But if you're driving it, and then I think it could work.
Yeah, and Moncton's been doing that, and they ran into a couple times where the snafu was the applicant bounces around really fast, and they're like, no, but on that, and it's like, whoa, hold on. The person driving needs to keep up with the documents, and they're fine with it. So sometimes you just got to rein in the applicant if they can get a little excited. John, you had a question? You're on mute.
Sorry. I wonder if this speaks to the desirability of having clear, short, concise guidelines for applicants, so we can say, here's what we're looking for. Pages should be numbered, for example. I don't know, whatever the 5 rules that help you organize it, and for us then to get through it and everybody be literally on the same page. I know when I've done my own applications over the years, I mean, I use the bylaws themselves as a guide. I just start at the top of the section that's applicable, say conditional use or whatever it is. And I just go through and I write my own narrative, and I usually end up with something that I feel is way too long, but at least it addresses everything in order. But I don't know if that's helpful for most applicants, are probably simpler, right?
Yeah, what I'm looking at is I created for applicants that are submitting site plans for applications. I did just what you talked about. I took the 10 requirements of the site plan and broke them out into bullet points for them and left them in an area where even if they want to hand pencil it in, they can do that. I can scan that. But that way, when you all are talking, the first thing you're going to talk about is this. And the second thing is that. So again, it goes back to consistency, which I think helps create a smoother meeting and a consistent decision process.
I think if you either you impose it, or I think it's better if you impose it, our own cataloging system. If it's, I don't care, rather than the title of the document, because we'll be fumbling. It's this particular piece of paper is document A. And we can all find document A, and so that, you can do that maybe.
Yeah. So like currently Valerie for the select board does that with all her documents. She does them with Roman numerals, but same concept. So
Yeah.
That's the first part. And so it's like Roman numeral 1, and then all the periphery title crap. But everyone knows when she says document 1, what document 1 means.
That's right. Otherwise you end up just trying to describe it and people get lost.
Yeah. I like that idea.
Chris, what's the requirement for having things turned in before the meeting? Are you accepting preliminary submissions and then a couple days before the meeting, it's final submissions? What's the standard there?
I have to look at the reg. We have some timeframes where they're required, but and that's for just the plat and the application. For all the periphery stuff, I've always asked people in other communities when I do this, just minimum 7 days, because I need to get it out to the board. One of my pet peeves with boards is, back in the good old days when we used to get packets in the mail, is showing up to a hearing and watching board members opening packets at the table. That tells me they haven't read a thing.
Really bad.
So my hopes is, one of the things I've been pushing for the last few years is just that. Before a hearing, I try to push out as many documents to the board as possible. There are going to be times where the applicant brings something in Monday night into my office at 5 o'clock, and we'll make it work. But for the most part, I really push people to a minimum a week in advance.
Yeah, and you've got the leverage by saying, until you get all this stuff in, I can't even notice a hearing.
100%.
That's your leverage, and it works.
Oh yeah, especially when they find out that it could be another 30 days if they don't get it in the next week. They seem to jump pretty quick for me.
So, Chris, are you going to be sending this stuff out in documents that we're going to be able to open without a struggle? Like I don't have Word on my computer.
Yeah, that was an oversight on my part. I apologize. Everything will be in PDF format.
Okay.
Because we have to. I think that's just a good standardized format. PDF Acrobat Reader is free, and it's available on all platforms. So I will ensure that any document that comes through, even if they provide it to me in another format, it will be presented to the board in PDF format.
Oh, thank you. That's well appreciated.
And the other piece of that.
Are you maintaining a FTP or somewhere, to house all these documents versus emailing them all, or not sure how you've handled in the past? Go ahead.
In the past, we just emailed it. I am trying to figure out a cloud solution because it's painful for email.
Yeah, well, emails fill up and get lost and buried. I get emails on the order of 50 to 100 a day. So
I feel your pain, man. I do this for 3 towns, so it's even harder keeping track of. I get a site plan trying to remember where the heck it came from. So we've got some cloud options that the town has access to, and I just have to find out what we have for accounts and that kind of stuff, and how to get you guys access to that once we set it up. I'm not a big fan of Google Drive. It's so
Yeah,
I've got some,
neither am I.
I have some other options. We have other options available to us for some cloud options. So, but that is the intent. Is I would send out a link at least to where those documents are each week before the hearing, so you would be able to get to them.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
I have a question. Just in general, I know like a permit application is posted in the town hall. I used to go in and just look at them for fun, actually, usually. But are there confidentiality issues around an applicant's application before it's warned or anything like that? All right.
No, as soon as anything's submitted to my office, it's public knowledge. So sometimes people will wait to the very last second to submit them, just if they have concerns because they don't want their project out there floating in the public eye too early. And I try to be as accommodating as possible. So if there may be those occasional rare times, John, where you guys get the email a few days in advance instead of a week in advance that something new has been posted. But by the time they're ready to submit an application, they're ready to go public because
It's out there. Yeah.
we're in a hurry.
So we're not sort of keeping an eye on protocols around that privacy.
No, they're public records as soon as they're submitted to Chris. There's no exception for applications that aren't complete yet. Yeah.
Great.
You know, so and there's another concern that's I think is important is that it's really not appropriate for applicants to be moving the goal line or changing things late in the game because the notices go out to the public and the public is told that they can come look at the application. It's really unfair if the application they look at is not the one that shows up at the hearing because sometimes people might say, oh, that's no problem. I'm not worried about that. And then there's a late change and
Right.
they didn't come to the hearing because they didn't think it was going to really impact them. So we really ought to be pretty strict about that. Minor things, sure, but
No,
they really
it's
ready to
usually
go.
supporting. It's usually supporting documents, Kevin, that come in late.
Right.
But the actual application itself, yeah, once it's been posted, that's the application. And now, if they want to make amendments to it, they have to go through the process.
Yeah, that's the way it should be. But there have been some developers who it's kind of a moving target about what the application actually is because they haven't thought it through thoroughly.
I'm well aware. I've been through many that have, I've got in some of my other communities on their DRB files, just because they keep changing their mind during the hearing process. I have one developer on one 8-lot subdivision that it's a 12-inch thick file.
Yeah.
And it took a year to get approved because they kept, maybe I want to change this. So the whole process would start over. So
This is
I
probably not
really-
totally fair, but what Kevin said earlier about trying to help an applicant through, I like that idea from the board's perspective. I like it from your perspective, Chris, especially if it's a resident and they don't really know their way through. If they're sophisticated, if they have counsel, if they're professionals, do it right. So I hate to say I have a double standard, but
No, that's important. I think that's exactly what we're supposed to do.
I'm willing to give a little hand up for, a resident who doesn't really understand it. And I think, our board chair can do that and you can do that. But other than that, I think we should make them do it right. And if they don't, then it means they have to wait a month. They wait.
Yeah.
But Tom, can you elaborate on that in the comment earlier about soft line drawings? Yeah, I guess that comment kind of surprised me.
Well, I think soft line drawings can be fine if they're done, if it really tells the whole story. I don't think it's ever going to tell the story in the case of a subdivision or a site plan, because those are a function of real engineering. I mean, you can't just, those lot lines are important and things like that.
Right.
But
The woodshed that's big enough to require a permit by square footage, it's okay to me if it comes in, even if it's not on grid paper. But
yeah, and sometimes you'll get somebody who'll have their own survey or something, and they've made a real effort to just draw it on there. And you know, I hate to take a resident like that where everybody knows and there's nobody objecting, and that person has to then tell them you have to go to an engineer and have that redrawn. Like, that's my sense of it.
So it's a question of scale and appropriateness, really.
Yeah, and accuracy. I mean, you come to a point where you think this just isn't. I mean, I can't assume accuracy on that.
yeah, it depends a lot on what the ask is. If it's the woodshed, we don't require as much as long as we know where it's going to go, but they need to know where their boundary lines are and how far it's going to be from them. And that's more than it would happen, maybe not a fair amount, but it did happen. We'd ask how far is it from your boundary line? And they'd say, well, geez, I don't know. I think it's, and you know, like that's sort of the basic information they gotta have.
Yeah. And to your point, Tom, I make that judgment call quite often from a zoning standpoint as well. Soft drawings, again, if it's the woodshed, as I tell people, I need a picture. I need you to draw me something or print out something that shows me your property, your boundaries, how far you are from the boundaries, and give me at least one other major landmark so I can get oriented. Typically, if they want to do an accessory building, I'll pencil your house on it. So I know that it's your northwest corner and here's where the road is. Perfect. I know where you're doing it. Now I can make an accurate judgment because I've got your measurements and that. If we're talking a 6-lot subdivision or an 8-unit PUD, there's not a chance that that's going to be adequate. I mean, in the end, they have to submit a plat anyway. So, and they have to do wastewater permits. So they've already got engineers doing work for big stuff. And again, if it's an engineer that does it, or a developer who does a lot of these things, I'll use John as an example. John, you do a great job. Your applications are very thorough, but you know the process. Your neighbor may not. And do we need that level of sophistication on all applications? Absolutely not. I'm very comfortable saying, you still need all the check boxes, but I don't need this level of detail. I need these things. So Josh, to your point, I agree that we can be, you can be have a little bit of latitude.
Okay.
But we can't go as far as having it on a napkin anymore.
I think we had one on the back of an envelope once.
I won't lie. I had a subdivision just a year ago brought to me that was on an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. It was just a square with another little square cut out of it. And they're like, oh, that's adequate. I'm like, well, maybe for approval, but I still need you to get surveyed. Well, I'm like,
I don't want to.
That's the law.
But you know, but also if it's a subdivision, somewhere along the line, somebody's gonna have to draw deeds. You know, so they're gonna have to do it anyway. So
That's
why
right.
don't we want it, you know.
Right.
So that's how we have it. I don't want to send somebody to a professional who isn't gonna need to if we don't need them to. But if they're gonna go anyway, then let's look at good documents.
Yeah. So like an example, I've got a gentleman who is talking. One of the applications you may see is he's thinking about possibly building a garage and trying to run a small repair shop out of it. I don't think he needs a survey for that, but he does need a drawing at a minimum that highlights all the requirements for a conditional use. But I don't think he needs to hire LaRose or Barnard to come out and do architectural grade drawings for that particular application. So it's scope and scale. To your point, Tom, anyone who does a subdivision, state law requires them to do wastewater. They're already got engineers.
Right.
Yeah.
So that, to me, that it becomes academic. We should see the documents that's going to be prepared.
I'm a little OCD about documents. I try to be about quality of document that the board sees.
No, I think you've struck the balance well, Chris. It's not that we've had that much work since you've been ZA, we haven't, but you've struck that well. You've got a good sense of that, I think.
Perfect. Anyone else have any input?
No, it's
So
been a
I
very
have
good
one
meeting.
last question. Excuse me, Tom,
No,
sorry.
sir. I
Go ahead,
just
Todd.
was
Go ahead.
complimenting Chris on organizing us well for an organizational meeting. I feel enthusiastic about being part of this board and look forward to working with all of you.
Thank you.
Ditto.
So Chris, I had one last question for you. Are we going to go back to in-person when this pandemic is over?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. At a minimum, I believe it'll be a hybrid meetings at worst case scenario. Even when things are back to normal, some folks still may not be comfortable coming to a meeting. But at a minimum, they would be required to Zoom in. I mean, we've got the technology at the office to be able to connect to the large screen TV and bring in a remote user or two if we had to. So the sooner you guys can get together around a table to have hearings, it's really better, because back to the discussion of documents, there's times where you're shuffling maps and documents around on a table and people penciling stuff in. It's really hard doing it here.
Now, I'm going to make a personal observation on this too, because I said I attend a lot of Zoom meetings, and they actually work pretty good. But I miss the chit chat that you can have with each other.
Absolutely.
In between the meeting, where you could just we got to have that too.
Yeah, no, that's right.
It's interesting in this age of Zoom. I mean, all the civic meetings I've taken part in the last year, they're actually pretty good, because I think because we're like literally in each other's faces. People tend to be a little more civil. They try to be a little calmer. You can hear, I don't know. Maybe it's a slight silver lining to the weirdness of it all.
You can see yourself being recorded.
Well,
I gotta say that the Zoom meeting has made it a lot easier for me to attend things like this. With two young kids, it's really opened the opportunity for me. Not to say that meeting in person would be out of the question, but this is really a luxury for me.
No, and again, knowing that for the last year, basically, we've proven out that this technology is a tool in the tool chest. I think hybrid meetings could be a viable solution. I go back to nights where we were struggling to get enough members. If somebody was at home and they could have Zoomed in to sit through the hearing from home, that hearing could have taken place and I wouldn't have had to push down another 30 days. So
right.
I'm all in for personal meetings. If you haven't noticed yet, I love personal meetings. I think it's a great thing, but I agree that we can embrace this technology and make sure that we provide as much access to the public and as much flexibility for the boards.
The thing that the remote Zoom meeting, the issue that it creates that is, a burden mostly for Chris, I guess, is we have to keep track of who's showing up. And some people are in and out, and because you have to have participated, you have to be an interested person, but you have to have participated in order to be eligible to appeal. And that can get challenging when people are in and out. We in a live meeting, we have a sign-in sheet. We have a record of everybody who was in attendance, and that's the universe from which interested persons can come. But it's the one we had about the solar field, Chris. People were in and out. That was I hadn't really thought about that a lot before because it was our first Zoom meeting. But I thought, oh my gosh, here's a potential minefield for us.
It is, and the select board has either they've drawn up or they've at the beginning of every one of their meetings they have a blurb on Zoom protocol, on remote meeting protocol, that I think would be imperative as well. That if it's a remote meeting, that it's at a minimum it's in the agenda. It's sort of like all the legalese and statute verbiage around executive session that you'll notice it's in the bottom of this. It should be there just for that, so that people are aware. Just popping in and out of a Zoom meeting doesn't mean you participated.
Well, can you control it, Chris, in that somebody would have to be admitted by you as a gatekeeper, and that way you can put their name down and stuff. Then you don't get people jumping in and jumping out.
Yeah, and that's how it's set up right now. So if somebody leaves, I have to let them back in.
Evan, what's the law on this? To be an interested party, do you have to attend the entire meeting, or can you?
No, you don't even have to attend, but you have to take a position. You can do it by letter, but you have to, right, there's no, you had to be there for the duration requirement, but you had to have spoken your piece.
Yeah. Okay. Well, maybe that's the thing in our guidelines, we need to tell people that. And if they leave, we won't worry about it as long as they, participated for a while.
Yeah, but an interested person is defined in statute. There are 4 or 5 different ways. Adjoiners are always interested, the applicant's interested, but it can be any 10 people in the town too.
Mm-hmm.
And then they have to appoint a spokesperson. But then there's this mushy, adjoining landowners, that's okay, they're automatic, but the statute actually says immediate neighborhood or immediate vicinity, something like that. So that can be a little loosey-goosey sometimes. So that's the chair's job, or whoever's running the hearing, to try and ferret that out when they start to talk. They're open meetings, anybody can talk. It's not when it becomes time for public comment or to ask questions. You don't have to be an interested person in order to ask questions or to say this, I think this is a great idea, or I think it's a bad idea. So it's not a filter as far as participation, but it is a threshold requirement in order to undertake an appeal. And it's our job as a board to create that record. It's usually not hard to figure out, but the immediate neighborhood part of immediate vicinity, that can be an issue. So you might say you got a wedding venue or something, and somebody's complaining, thinks it's going to be too noisy, but they live up by Carroll, and the venue is down on 116, south of town.
Yeah.
And I say, okay, well, they can say their piece, but they're not going to be an interested person. I can put that would be a good thing to remember to put into our cheat sheet about, just so we all, it sounds like it's almost always easy, but it is actually defined. So there is a little bit of judgment call sometime, but it's defined. And it would be good to have that reference.
Perfect. Anything else?
We ready to call it a night and Chris and I will get working?
I'm ready to sign off. Yeah.
All right.
It was great.
Do you have a motion?
Yeah, if somebody could make a motion to adjourn, that'd be great, just so it's on the record.
I move to
I'll make that
adjourn.
motion.
Yeah, I got John. Do I have a second on the motion?
I second John's motion.
Perfect. You guys.
All those in favor?
Hands?
Thank you.
Awesome. Hey, everyone have a great night. Thank you. I look forward to working with you guys and gals. If you have questions, always feel free. My phone is on and my email is available to help you out.
Thanks,
Okay.
guys. Look forward to
Thank
working with
you.
you all. Thanks,
Come on,
Carol.
everybody.
Thanks, folks.
Good night.